Okay. Here we are.
I have a joy.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Ken.
I got 2 calls last night. I have won $280,000.
Oh, man, we're so excited for you.
That will take care of our church. Oh, wonderful.
Talk about
Hey,
generosity.
Pastor Jim. Pastor Jim
And they wanted my bank name, and I wouldn't give it to him. So he hung up and said he'd call me tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'm not gonna be home.
I hate it that people will try to prey on others like that.
You want to open your present?
Oh, sure, okay. Well, yeah, let me see. I should probably get it. Well, I guess they can see us here, so. Okay, here we go.
All right.
Oh, look at this. It says, pastor warning, anything you say or do could be used in a sermon.
It goes with your apron.
Yes, I've got a whole set now. Thank you.
Do you have the sock?
So, let's see, did I hold it up for the, yeah, for those at home, this is, okay.
Did you see the picture of him reclining in the chair with his socks?
I did, yeah.
Okay, well, we pick up at Capernaum. And what I'm planning to do today, if I can be nimble about it here, which is, there's no guarantee of that. I know Wikipedia is not always the best, but you can get some basics there. And Capernaum comes from 2 words, and that last one is Nahum, which you might recognize as a minor prophet, Nahum, we say. But I didn't learn the pronunciation of that word until I was in Mexico on a mission trip, and one of the children was Nahum. And so Capernaum, or Nahum, Capernaum. So it's Nahum's village, or Nahum's village, and it is on the western side of the Sea of Galilee. And it had a population of about 1,500 in the 1st century AD, so in the time that we're kind of looking at. It's cited in all 4 Gospels and was said to be the hometown of Matthew the tax collector. So, I knew you were curious about that.
Yes.
Located not far from Bethsaida, which we apparently didn't visit, the hometown of the apostles Simon Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And it says that Jesus did spend time in Capernaum. In fact, Jesus taught in the synagogue there, and I'm going to show you a synagogue, but the one that I'm showing you is a couple of hundred years later. The one that Jesus taught at is underneath, at least the foundation is. And so only parts of it are exposed. So I don't want to make you think, oh, that's the synagogue that Jesus. Well, not quite, but it's the place, and it's still very historically interesting. That's where he healed a man who was possessed by the unclean spirit from Luke 4 and Mark 1, and that is notably the only story that is in common to both Gospels of Mark and Luke that's not in Matthew. So that's an anomaly there. Afterward, Jesus healed Simon Peter's mother-in-law. Remember I said her house was there. And that was in Luke 4. And according to Luke 7, and Matthew 8, this is also the place where Jesus healed the servant of a Roman centurion who asked for his help. Capernaum is the location of healing the paralytic lowered by friends through the roof to Jesus, as described in Mark 2, 1-12, and Luke 5, 17 and 26. So just to put us in the mood, let's go to Luke 4, and we'll read a couple of spots from Luke 4 so that we understand the Bible component of the significance of Capernaum from this standpoint. I'm going to read first Luke 4, 31 through 36. He went down to Capernaum, a city in Galilee, and was teaching them on the Sabbath. They were astounded at his teaching because he spoke with authority. In the synagogue, there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, who cried out with a loud voice, "Let us alone! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." When the demon had thrown him down before them, he came out of them without having done any harm. And they were all amazed and kept saying to one another, "What kind of utterance is this? For with authority and power he commands unclean spirits, and out they come." And a report about him began to reach every place in the region. Okay, then we have the next passage is, as we continue at verse 38, it just goes on, more things happening in that area. After leaving the synagogue, he entered Simon's house. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked him about her. Then he stood over her and rebuked the fever. Immediately she got up and began to serve them. As the sun was setting, all those who had any who were sick with various kinds of diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on each of them and cured them. Demons also came out of many, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak, because they knew that he was the Messiah. At daybreak he departed and went to a deserted place. So I'll stop there. So now we at least have some of the background of where we are. So Capernaum, as you can see, will be number 11, which is crammed in up here at the top of the Sea of Galilee. So we had been to Chorazin. That's that place with the darker stones, where we saw the U-shaped serving arrangement and the archway into the city, the tunnel down into the cleansing pool that you go through. So now it's not very far to Capernaum, the home of Matthew, the tax collector, and a lot of these places are concentrated around the Sea of Galilee for good reason. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a synagogue there that dates to the 4th century, the 300s, 400s, through earthquakes and through the Roman conquering. Most of what we find there is not original. Most of it came later. They can find artifacts from that time, or if they dig deeper. And it's interesting how they would build on the same site. So this synagogue is said to be the upper level, and underneath it are the ruins of the synagogue that Jesus would have taught at, they believe. So we are gathered in this. Now the stones here, you'll notice, are whiter than what they were in Chorazin. They were limestone quarried from far away. And apparently a Roman centurion who was wealthy commissioned this. So here's our group. And one of the things that was fascinating to us, you see we're all looking down, at least most of us are. The centurions were, as you would imagine, in the military, a lot of the stuff that you do is hurry up and wait. It's, there's a lot of standing around and trying to fill your time. So in the stones on the ground, can you see, do I have this? Let me get it bigger. There we go. That's better. Can you see the outline? And that's a little game board that they would have chiseled into the stones. And so our tour guide put some coins there saying that they had a dice game that they would play. And he even has a name for it. I have forgotten it. I have to look it up. And so there was something about working your way to the center in this. So that was one of the ways they passed the time. And so I don't know how far back this dates, but it's quite quite an old artifact there. So, and very interesting. This I find very difficult. When you go to the place where it says Peter's house was at the time, because Peter's mother-in-law had lived there. Peter came originally from Bethsaida, but his mother-in-law was there, so Peter lived here now. And it's covered by this strange glass so that it can be preserved. And as you look down, apparently the shape is octagonal of the area that's covered. And there was an ancient church built there on top of the site of what was believed to be Peter's house, where his mother-in-law lived. And so, to me, I've never been able to glean much. I remember looking at it thinking, it looks like a pile of rocks. I mean, I could at least see the outline of something that looked like it was structured. If I go to, let me go back to this. I don't know if people at home will see this, but in Capernaum, there's some additional pictures that I found. There's the, can you see that at home? I don't know. You can see it here for sure. Yeah, there it is. Walls of the octagonal 5th century church, so that's 400s, visible through a glass floor. So that's what that was. So a church built on the site of where they believe Peter's house was. And then there's a modern memorial built, which I don't have a picture of, but that's a site of it. And I don't know if I'm showing the people this at home or not. So let me do it this way. I'll stop that share and bring it up so they can. All right, now they should be seeing it. So this is the chapel that's built around that, and in the center you can see that's where I took the photo of the glass that covers the artifacts of the old church, which covers the artifacts of what is believed to be Peter's house. And so this is, they go to great pains, obviously, to preserve what they can, and yet allow tourism in ways that won't be destructive. So you'll see a lot of these where it's either fenced off or glassed off. You can look down, but you can't get to it. Archaeologists can, and we did see a lot of archaeological groups there working on various things. Okay, oops, wrong. Share screen. And, okay, so moving on. So that's the view of it, to give you at least an idea. This was, and I've shown you this once before, because when our tour guide was talking about it, this is an ancient carving. Not sure if it dates back before the 300s, could. It's a little difficult to make out, but at the bottom there are clearly wheels, and then there's 5 posts here, 5 pillars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then as it turns the corner, there are 2 doors with an archway there. But when we were looking at it, a lot of the tour guides will tell the tourists this is perhaps a depiction of the Ark of the Covenant. Turns out that's not the case. At least, yeah, that's been refuted. And that would make sense. I don't picture the Ark of the Covenant having to look like this.
And they didn't have wheels on it, did they?
Well, it
on
was
poles.
it was on poles, but it also was carried on a cart sometimes. So that could have been.
Yeah.
And it's not entirely impossible. I don't know if this figure over here would have been one of the cherubim, or at least that may be why it's mistaken. Anyway, but suffice it to say, it's still a fascinating artifact from the time and shows the intricacy of their stone carving qualities. So that was our time in Capernaum. And then we moved on to Yardenit. Now, Yardenit is basically a tourist site. And so we went from the north side of the Sea of Galilee at number 11, and we went all the way down to number 12 here at the south side, and this is the head of the Jordan River. So the river starts here, and then it goes down into the Dead Sea. I'm not sure what feeds into the Sea of Galilee. Certainly there are feeders for that. But anyway, this is a place that they have decided to make a tourist visitation site to the Jordan River. And it's fascinating. And so you'll see here at the entrance, there's French, Spanish, English in the passage from Mark. Let me go to Mark 1 and see if I can find it here and read it from the Bible. And you'll understand then when we read it why. 1:11? Mark 1:9-8. Okay, it starts at verse 9, I'm sorry. Mark 1, verse 9. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven and said, "You are my Son, the beloved. With you I am well pleased." So those verses are depicted in so many languages I couldn't count them all. As you see, here's English, French, and Spanish at the entrance, but then in Sri Lankan, and then as we go on, there were hundreds of languages with that carved in. So we came to the site where they've actually built a place where you can step down into the water. They will, for $10, you get a robe that you can change in a locker room and come out. And if people want to be baptized, or in my case, remember their baptism, you can go down into the greenish colored water in an area that this to us says, yeah, I can tell that's a river. That certainly it goes, people are standing in it up to their chest. And but lots of areas of the Jordan River are like a creek. So we don't know where Jesus was baptized and how the depth or the look of it. The water in February when we were there was in the 40s or 50s. It was breathtakingly cold. I mean, when you went in, and I was determined to go in, but I mean, so and all of the many of the people in our group wanted to do that. So my roommate Danny wanted the privilege of doing the 3 dunks with me, and I was very adamant that I'm not being rebaptized, but I'm remembering my baptism. And so he was very honored, and there's a video of this actually that I think that person was taking right there on the left. And let's see if I've got, okay, so yeah, there you go. And you see I'm wisely holding on to the fence.
Yes.
That was the second dunk. The first dunk, I was not holding on to the fence. And Danny was losing me into and so he grabbed me to pull me back up, and there's a picture of him grabbing me by the throat.
So photogenic.
He loved that so much that he grabbed me by the throat to save my life and pulled me back up. So anyway, so then with my eczema, lovely, I remembered the story of the general that came from the north that was told by Elijah, go duck in the Jordan River for 7 times.
7 times, yeah.
And he was all upset. He said, we've got better rivers up where I come from in Syria. And the servant said, if he would have asked you to do something wild, you would have done it. Why not try it? So and I wasn't expecting miracles, although maybe I should have been, but even in the cold, I did my 7 ducks in the pond. So.
Good.
Pastor Jim, in biblical books, when we were children, it always seems as if the pictures in our Bible, Bibles with pictures, was always arid and very desert. I am shocked that we were talking that it was so green and lush. I had no idea.
Throughout this presentation, you will see, I think, all kinds of representations. There will be arid areas, agricultural areas, areas like this that have the trees and so forth on the banks. So it's a great variety. But in that small region, it's difficult to have a lot of agriculture, so they really have to be creative, and they are being creative. They're irrigating in ways that are, they even now grow bananas and things there.
Wow.
Okay, so that was, and one of the things I want to say now, this is at number 12. It's here on the Jordan River, at the south end of the Sea of Galilee, and the accounts of Jesus' baptism would place where he was baptized much further south to about this area next to what is listed as Jericho. So Jesus probably would have been baptized much further south. Why do they do that? Because this was a much more logistically safe and plausible place for tourism.
Yeah.
Here, with the width of the river and so forth, and the Palestinians and the Jordanians and so forth, it was not practical to make that a very heavily visited tourist site. Whereas here, so you get the idea. I mean, it's not the original spot, but it is the Jordan River. So, okay, so that was our whirlwind tour there. Now we still had some spots there up north or west of the Sea of Galilee. So we're going to go next to, I say Magdala, some say Magdala. All right, and what does that remind you of when we say Magdala?
Magdalene.
Okay, yeah, this is where it's believed that Mary of Magdalene was from. So, and the names are there for, they have different variations from the different languages. So that's why you find it that way. When we drove into the town, and again, you see that a lot of it, you have the security fencing and the infrastructure, but up in the hills, these are ancient caves that overlooked the city there. So, and so you would, and maybe even to this day, we didn't see them in every place, but we saw flocks of sheep and goats with shepherds up on mountainsides like this. And I know from Bethlehem that those caves were oftentimes shelters where the shepherds would hang out. So and the sheep and the goats they have evolved to be on that terrain, that steep mountainside terrain. So that it would not be surprising if even riding around today, whenever you see something like this, if you look closely, oh yeah, there's a shepherd with some sheep up there, or goats.
What's up at the top?
Yeah,
Right up there where
Right
your
there, where
pointer
you-
is.
to the right of that, the flat.
That one there,
Is that a big
and then there's
building?
another one to the left.
It's a rock formation.
Both of them are?
Yeah,
Okay.
those are
It's
rock.
so flat because the
Yeah.
picture cut it off, is that right?
Okay. There was, we didn't go up there to see any kind of ruins or anything.
Okay.
They were rock formations. So let me now pull up my other page here, if I can get there quickly. Boom. So now let's go to Magdala. Interesting. It was known as Magdala Nunaya, which means the Tower of the Fishes. And why that was is because it was so close to the Sea of Galilee, And it was a location where the fishermen would come in, and this is where they processed the fish. And there's actually a fish market then, I believe, very close to there. So, but the actual city was named the Tower of the Fishes, Magdala Nunaya. It's believed to be the birthplace of Mary Magdalene. Excuse me. And then you'll see, I will show you a closer up picture of this, what they believe is that was the fish market and then a synagogue, and those were kind of communal areas. And some of that mosaic tile floor is still preserved. And so I've got another photo of that I can show you. So they had a synagogue there. It was a fishing village, and it was especially valued by the Romans, for example, because of the commerce that was going on there. There were a lot of taxes they were able to, because of all the commerce that was happening with the fishing markets. Okay, anything else I need to show here? I don't think so. Okay, current slide. Go. There we go. Okay, so as we went in, they are in active excavation, and you can see these would have been dwelling places and communal areas. There's a channel for water, which that was original to the time. They were very skillful in how they would channel water. We're going to come to one place where it's built so that the grade is that you started up top, and the water ran through the whole town. And it started out with this is the water we use for cooking and drinking, and then this is the water we use for bathing, and this is the water we use for irrigation, and this is the water we use to clear away the unmentionables. So, but it was all downhill, so very ingenious in how they did it. So, and so these areas that are built like this is where the tourists could go. We did see archaeologists down here doing their tedious and slow work to try and unearth all of the things that they can. There's been much done since then. In Magdala, in 2021, they've just had a whole new discovery of Second Synagogue. So much has happened since I've even been there. But again, because they rely so heavily on tourism, and it's such a lucrative opportunity, that's why you see the modern looking building around the site, and they take great care not to destroy anything. They work around it, they work above it, and so oftentimes you're indoors looking down at the archaeological sites, or you're walking around the perimeter. And so then we went indoors. And here, of course, there's a chapel there now. And this is a depiction of Peter having walked on the water, but then began to sink, and Jesus reaching out. And with that story of Peter getting out of the boat and walking on the water, it brings to mind, I really appreciated my let's see, Elmer Collier. Elmer Collier was he theology professor? Yeah, Elmer Collier, and he was United Methodist. When I went to University of Dubuque, we had as many Methodists as we had Presbyterians, and we had several others that were there. But we had Methodist faculty, we had Presbyterian, we had different ones, and then there was a Lutheran seminary not far from there that we took classes at as well. So, and that was fantastic. What a great experience to get those things. So Elmer Collier was a Methodist, and he said, I have been educated beyond my intelligence. And but he gave a story sermon on this passage. And when he taught theology in such an eclectic setting with all these different comers from different denominations and backgrounds, you can bet that he got a lot of questions about the historicity of these events. What do you think, Professor Collier? Did Peter walk on the water, and was that a real miracle, or was this a kind of a mythological story that was built up around their belief around Jesus? What do you think? Is it historical or not? And as a seminary professor, I guess you sign up for that. That's the kind of thing you expect. You're going to get those questions, and you're going to be part of those arguments who say, this is historical, this is superstitious, the supernatural is possible, it's not possible. So he's in the midst of that. And with this particular story, he told it from both perspectives. And he came to that place, and I can't do it justice the way he did. But when he got to the point where the story says that when Peter began to sink, Jesus reached out and brought him back up. And then he said, whether it was a real story or whether it's a myth, that meaning is the crux of it. This is what they were trying to convey about who they knew Jesus to be. And so he knew that we will never be able to convince one way or the other in this life which of these stories is historical, which is mythological, or for lack of a better word, legend might be a better way of saying it. And so, but he wanted us to know that whatever perspective we lean towards, the truth and the meaning of the stories could be gleaned. Where the trust and the depth of their belief in who Jesus was and what Jesus came to do. So I wish I could do it as powerfully as he could. I was out of breath when he did that. So now this is here in Magdala, their chapel that they've built. And so they have fashioned their table as a boat. So that this is where you see there's a microphone sticking up out of it. And they have candles, and so they could serve communion, and I'm sure they do from there.
And the stairs.
Yeah, exactly. She was observing the stairs because of the kind of stone they used, look like water.
It does. And then the net.
Yeah, where's the net? I'm missing it.
It's draped on either side of the stairs. See how it's a black net? So like they're casting for fish.
Why am I missing it here? What's the matter with me?
Right there. See where your cursor is? That's on a black net.
Okay, well, yeah, the rope.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's to cordon it off the area so that people aren't running up there. But that's outstanding. So, and then these are typical of the art of the area up on the sides there. And this is an active chapel that was used at the time we were there, and I hope to this day.
Was the floor painted blue? It looks like stone.
I don't think it was painted. I think that's the type of stone.
It's probably
It may be synthetic. I'm not sure. But they, obviously they wanted to maximize the view straight through to the Sea of Galilee out there. So yeah, it's stunning, beautiful. I think we need to maybe start a fundraiser so that we can send them cushions for their pews.
A mission.
So underneath, there are 4 chapels, and this, because of Mary Magdala, or Mary Magdalene, or Mary of Magdala, this whole building that we've just seen, the worship center up top, this is down below, there are 4 different chapels, and they are dedicated to women. So the whole area is heavily dedicated to women. So in this lower chapel, which the stones on the floor go back historically. So it was in an area that was original to Jesus' time. And they've since made it a worship area. And this beautiful mural is, can you guess what story that is?
Yeah, the washing of the feet.
Yes. Yeah. It's where the woman who had the hemorrhage tried to sneak through the crowd.
Reached out and touched.
And reached out to touch. And so there's this depiction of the power coming out of Jesus, and the woman was healed. What a significant story that is. I wish I would have had the money to buy a print, because I can't find it anymore, when I was in seminary, and even before that, when I was working with the youth. And it was a modern depiction of this scene, and it was a little bit, you could see a little bit more of Jesus' robe and the feet around him, but it was similar to that. But it was a wider shot, and you could actually see in the print, the way they did it, was a depiction of a teenage girl in jeans,
Wow.
reaching out to touch. And as I was working with youth at the time, it was called The Touch, and if I can ever find it again, I'll get it. But what I found out was that, and the way it was from the side, so you saw Jesus' foot with the sandal from the side. And I worked with a gentleman at the TV station, Tom Pearson, who said that his friend was the model that they used for the feet. So, and apparently they did it with photography and then turned it into an artwork print. I don't know how they do it. So it was a couple of $100 at the time, and I just couldn't swing it. So this would have been, now you see the mosaic tiles and so forth, covered over now to protect it as they do the archaeological dig, believing that they've got this as an area that was synagogue, but also in this area fish market as well. So they could use these areas kind of communally. And wherever these mosaic patterns are preserved, it's fascinating. I mean, how intricate they are. And these are marvelously preserved here. Of course, they're wavy now and so forth, but having come through all that they have through history is remarkable. So,
Is that some kind of paint that they put on there? How would it?
I believe the stones are different color. I think they would quarry the stones, and there's a name for those little tiles.
Yeah.
So it's like inlaid?
Yes, those are all individual tiles inlaid, and I don't think they had any kind of adhesive that I know of.
Yeah, wow.
So I don't know how they got them so tightly packed that they would endure.
Were women were they allowed to go into the fish market? If it was parallel to the synagogue?
In Jesus' time, probably no. They probably had, in the synagogue, for example, they might have an outer staircase to the upper level to the synagogue. And they would have their places where the women would go to the markets, but they were kept at home and even in the back of the house, so that you weren't, because they were very strict about men were not supposed to interact with women, and if someone interacted with your wife, even from a distance, it was not to be done. So it's a very different way of living, and they made it work. So obviously, we have a different situation now, and thank goodness we don't do that. Modern times, the fact that the church and the chapels are dedicated to women, I think is a nod to that fact, that the women were so significant, and the stories were not told through their perspectives, but we at least got Mary Magdalene, and we got perspective enough. And so as a nod to their significance, and if I think I can find it here. Hold on, let me share screen again. I'll try. Is that the one? No, this is the one. No? There we go. That's what I want. And I'm still on Magdala, yes. Okay. Where is it? I looked up that chapel, and maybe, I don't know if I kept it or not then. Maybe I didn't. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, it's got its own page. The chapel is called Duc in Altum, and that's Latin. And it means put out into the deep. So that's the name of the chapel. And here is the outer area, talk about a narthex, holy cow. And you see they've tried to be true to the patterns in the floor and the stone. And there are 8 pillars in a circle or an oval form. And in this area, all 7 of the 8 pillars have carvings that memorialize women of the Bible. And the 8th pillar is left empty for all the women who visit, and to represent all the women who are not. So it is truly a chapel that is built with the idea of honoring women. Okay, I don't have much more to show there, but I'm glad to at least share that much. Okay, back to our heroes.
When they have a war going on, are they cognizant of artifacts of Israel?
I would have to say no. So, over the years, bombs going off, who knows what untold artifacts have been destroyed, buried forever, disfigured, disintegrated. Where you can, I'm sure care is taken. But even in Greece, the Parthenon, my understanding is that, I don't know if it was World War I or some other time, one of the generals had the brilliant idea of storing ammunition and weapons in the Parthenon, because surely they won't bomb the Parthenon. Nope, bombs came in, so yeah, and they are restoring it this very, very meticulously. But so yeah, I'm sorry to say that not only earthquakes and natural disasters, but human carelessness, looting, war, agriculture, building, unintentional and intentional, a lot has been lost, I'm sure. But a lot has been preserved and found, and there's more happening all the time. So, all right, next, we went from, that was Magdala, so it's really west of the Sea of Galilee. And we went a little bit further northeast to number 14 here, right on the Sea of Galilee. And when I showed you the picture of us on the boat, I was trying to point in that direction, because I said, you remember the Sermon on the Mount? All right, the name of that place is Tabgha. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it is believed to be the place where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount and fed the 5,000. Now here were some fascinating tools that they had. In the back, this is an olive press. There you go. So there's, and so the olives would be brought in, and somehow these would be used to press the olives, to drain the olive oil that came, and I don't know how it worked. But when you look at one of these, I don't know how much this millstone would have weighed. Hundreds of pounds easily. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to budget. And so when Jesus would say, it is better for one to have a millstone tied around one's neck and thrown into the sea than to harm one of these little children. That's the kind of millstone they were talking about. So.
And they would have had a post or something in there and have maybe an ox or something?
An ox walking around, yeah, or some sort of an animal, donkey, I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know how they tilted it up, but I think that flat surface was how the olives were pressed. And they would have that going for hours at a time, I'm sure.
And then did it run out the bottom right there where that little opening is down there?
I can't say for sure how they did that.
Yeah.
There was a way, and I really don't know how this other, oops, I went the wrong way. I'm not sure about this, but all of that had to do with how it was filtered and drained and put into containers. So why don't we assign Patty to study?
Yes.
Patty, why don't you study how they did the olive oil through those presses and get back to us? I'd like a 3-page report on my desk in the morning.
Single spaced.
Patty's not responding.
Yeah. She's too busy running around the park in Washington, D.C. Our tour guide, you see, is speaking into a a little device there. We all had earpieces. But I also was recording with a little digital device too, and I've got a lot of what he said preserved. So now, here is the chapel at Tabgha that commemorates the feeding of the 5,000. Beautiful, and there is one there from the earlier times when this chapel was built. Obviously, this is more modern, this portion of it. But in the center, they have a preserved area with a mosaic floor that goes back, not to the time of Jesus, but goes back many centuries. And it has this in the mosaic on the floor. Does anyone recognize it?
Yes, it's your communion set.
So the communion set that I take comes from this very place, actually. That's where she bought it when she brought it for me, and I was able to see. And I've since received another tray that someone found at a garage sale that goes with it and sent it to me. So the color is different, but the idea of the 2 fish and the 5 loaves in the basket is right there before the table. And so they've built this whole chapel around this preserved mosaic floor that goes back many centuries.
And may I be a little irreverent at this point and say that the stuff in the back there looks like one of those tear-apart loaves that you put.
Oh, yeah. It
does.
And what it is oftentimes what you find here, and we would have to look it up, but what you find here is this is a significant, it's believed to be a significant rock where something significant happened. I don't know if this is where they thought Jesus stood, but whenever you see something like this, they will often build around the rock, just like on the Temple Mount, where it's thought that Abraham sacrificed Isaac there.
Right.
They have that little top of the rock there, Mount Moriah, exposed, and they've built around it, and it's sacred. Several places are like that, and the factual, the historicity of the origin of it, again, it's difficult to prove. Some they're more confident of others. I'm sure there's a significance to that rock. And the reason it's discolored is through the centuries, people go and they bow and they touch it. So that's why it's darker. Probably they've protected it now so that it's not. But there are other places where we even did that very thing. There's a place that's said to be where Jesus ascended into heaven, and there's a little cutout, and this is supposedly somehow people believe it is the imprint of his sandal in a rock.
Yeah.
And so we all went in as a gesture and touched it. Very touristy. So some of these things you have to kind of take with a grain of salt. So there can be meaning in it, as long as you're aware that it's not always the original. Okay. Questions up to this point or comments? Okay, next stop was number 15. So we went a little bit further southwest here. And that was Cana. What was significant about Cana? So this will be a learning experiment. Once you hear it, you'll say, oh yes, I knew that. John chapter 2. Okay, John chapter 2. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Starting at verse 1. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana of Galilee. This area is Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. Now, the wedding was not a Saturday afternoon bash. It was a week-long celebration. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." Now this coming from John, who we believe is the last gospel writer, we believe is the last living apostle, who of all the others that were martyred, we don't know that John was. He was exiled, we believe, but not martyred. And so he's telling from a different perspective, writing at about 100 AD or a little bit later, we think. So he's telling stories that maybe he knew the other gospel writers either didn't know or include, and this is one that's unique here. And so this is now known as Jesus' first miracle. Before Jesus was ready, and it was only because Mary said, hey.
Yeah. Pay attention to your mother.
So his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification. They weren't like this. They were 5 feet tall, that big, huge deal. So they were massive. And we saw some that were replicas, at least, of those. Each holding 20 or 30 gallons of water. So there you go. Jesus said to them, fill the jars with water. Each could hold 20 or 30 gallons, rather. Jesus said, fill the jars with water. So they filled them up to the brim, 30 gallons worth. He said to them, now draw some out and take it to the chief steward. So they took it. And when the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, well, the servants who had drawn it, the steward called to the bridegroom and said, everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now. Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples, John of which, who would have been one, believed in him. So that's a story that is associated with this place, Cana of Galilee. Shock, they have a chapel there. And so, again, very touristy. Nothing in this area would have dated back to Jesus, except for, yes, go ahead, Nancy.
You know how when we did parables, and we had the realization that every parable really was about your faith in believing that Jesus is the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
That was his first miracle, right?
According to John.
According to John. So when you were reading that, he said that it was, was he relating it to knowing about God being the Son, or Jesus being the Son of God? Because it was 11 AD, it was after the fact. So is there more to that than just the words?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, what would they be? About the wine.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking while you were reading, you save the best for the last.
Mm-hmm.
So is that we save the best because we know Jesus died for us, and the best is eternal life?
Mm-hmm.
Is that connecting, or is that?
It would take research to do that,
Patty?
but preachers do that. Yeah, Patty, we need some more research. Preachers do that, and teachers do that. When we look at this, but what you try and do is you try to do what's called exegesis. You try and bring out from the text what it meant to the original people and audience, and the different settings, what it meant in the time of Jesus, what it meant to John at the time he wrote it, and to the audience at that. So there's different Sitzen-Leben situations in life, they call it. So the story is about a time previous. And so it has meaning based on how those people would have, yeah. It had meaning at the time that John or whoever wrote it and that audience, and it has meaning to the people after. So you kind of look at that, you look at the context, and then you look at how does this fit in with the other gospel reports? Can I make this work? And there are mysteries, and there are things, there's called a harmony of the gospels. I've got a book in my office that tries to put a chronological side by side of how it might have gone. And it's really difficult to do. You really can't pound them all together. I was told that when we have the four Gospels, remember that it's, if there is an intersection and there are several people around it, and then an accident happens at the intersection, and the police go around and they interview all the witnesses. And this, well, wait a minute, that's not what this person's. You're going to get perspectives. I saw it from this side, and this is what happened, and this is how I saw it. And they say that's what the gospel writers are to us. It's four witnesses of a truthful occurrence, witnessing to something they believe that was life-alteringly important, and yet we can't harmonize them perfectly together because they came through different perspectives. Yeah, and if Mark ordered the stories in a way that remember the Oreo cookie? He wanted to put this story in the middle of the beginning and end of another story. Is that how it really happened, or was Mark doing that to tie the points together? It's valid either way. It's valid if that was historically how it happened, but it's also valid if Mark was inspired to say, hey, we saw Jesus do this and we saw Jesus do this. Let's tie that together so people get it.
And the other part is, didn't you say that each of the Gospels was written for a different audience? So Mark would have been written for the Jews, and Matthew.
Well, Matthew was Jewish, the most Jewish.
Okay.
Luke was the most Gentile. Mark, they think, was the first gospel, the earliest, we think, although there's a dispute of that too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, but I understand what you're saying about the letters that were written to the people of Corinth and the Philippians.
Right.
Yeah, each one, and so they kind of tied it into what would be relevant to those people. If they
That
were
audience.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
they were shepherders or
Yeah.
shepherders.
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 That's a new word.
Right.
We've had some new words.
Nancy
on
gave me those
here.
letters, shepherders.
You know, according to this scripture on here, mother looks at Jesus and says like, well, you know. So in other words, if this was his first miracle, there had to be many before that she knew what powers he
Well,
had.
Yeah.
You know that?
We-
And then she said.
We're told from the other gospels that she was aware of the circumstances of his birth and pondered all these things in her heart.
Right.
So, who knows? But
So
it's
it's like she knew he could fix it.
but to get this from John, who may have been the youngest of the disciples or among the youngest, who was especially favored by Jesus, it's interesting that he would bring out that kind of dynamic.
Right.
Mary is never referred to by name in the Gospel of John. It's always the mother of Jesus. So,
We know who mother is.
I like this map. If you can, it's small in your view, but it shows you in an outline the region of Galilee.
Yeah.
So all the places I've been traipsing here in this part of it are basically in the region of Galilee. So put your hands in the hands of the man from Galilee.
You make a great song.
Yeah, we should do something with that. It's Cana is a small village north of Nazareth. The mother of Jesus is never named in John. Woman is a term of respect and affection. Doesn't seem to come off that way when I deal with Chris.
No.
Okay, the hour of Jesus' glory had not come yet. And it was not to be determined. Jesus was kind of implying by his mother's desires.
Yeah.
Rites of purification were ceremonial. Unlike the clay or wooden vessels, stone vessels would not become ceremonial unclean by contact with an unclean object or person. The steward was the head waiter or master of ceremonies for the week. And Jesus' miracles were not wonders to astound, but signs pointing to his glory, according to this note. So God's presence in him. And
that's what ours says too. Basically, that it was his first miracle and where he revealed his glory. So that
Yes.
was a really, And it was interesting that his mom, isn't it?
She knew.
She knew.
But I don't know at what point in his ministry that was, because we have another account, remember in the Gospels, where Jesus' mother and brothers come to get Jesus as he's preaching, and they say, oh, we're sorry, I guess he's gone a little off his rocker. They thought at one point that he was not mentally well, and they were embarrassed. So at some point, I don't know how this fits in, and so we contemplate those things. And I mentioned the word exegesis, which is to bring out the meaning. And so we try very much to do exegesis, and we try not to do eisegesis, to put our own meaning into it. And that's really difficult, because we come to it with our perspective. But at least we're aware of that humbly. So if I were to go and say, well, this was Merlot because, or whatever, because I have some sort of, that's the best wine, or I don't know what is, I'm not a wine person, but I might try and impose my own meaning into it. So that's something to be aware of too. So we try our best to use context, to use the other Gospels, to use the rest of Scripture, the witness of the church, in order to do our best exegesis with as little eisegesis as possible. Okay.
If you saw the big vases that they had of wine, how did they pour them if they held that many gallons?
Well, what Jesus said was he dipped into them.
Oh, basically,
So
just-
I would imagine they had a 5-foot ladle for all I know.
Really?
A big straws.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6 around there.
It's my turn, get out of the way.
Well, I keep pushing the wrong button here. I'll get it. Darn it. I
It's
gotta
a
share
wine.
this first. I gotta
Give
get
me
back
that
to
straw.
Zoom. There we go.
Hold
Share
up.
screen. Boom. Okay. All right. From current slide go. Okay. So now inside here, this is a great example of an archaeological site that you can look down into but don't have access to. And so these are areas in Cana where we look down and see what kinds of ruins that they're uncovering, and what they might, yes, yeah, but whatever you do. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. When we went there, we tried not to disturb this group that was worshiping in the chapel there. Beautiful, ornate, and this was apparently maybe an Asian group or Philippine group or something like that. But I was able to zoom in, and this is the base of the communion table. And you see the grapes and the vines carved into it. So the architecture is understandably impressive.
Do they always call them chapels? Nothing was ever called sanctuaries, just chapels.
I'm not confident on that. I'm so used to saying chapel, and probably would be even more authentic to go back to, because they speak Hebrew to this day. Whatever Hebrew word they use might be better.
Well, in Europe, they're all cathedrals or chapels. You never hear the word sanctuary.
Yeah, I don't, we more commonly would say church, but for some reason, I think chapel is more common. Okay, so 16, this is the area of Nazareth. So here is, and it's a little bit southwest of Cana. And maybe, let's see, where are we at today? We got a little time still. All right, so let's dive into Nazareth here. It's a bustling area. And this reminds me of your question, Nancy. I don't know that these stones that are obviously have some sort of wear or who knows. And so I don't know if this is the case, but I know in the walls in Jerusalem, the original stone walls with the archways, and you'll see this later when we get to Jerusalem. You asked about, well, when they're at war, do they at least try to preserve things? Well, the stones on the walls are full of machine gun bullet pockmarks. It's just, somebody just up and so that wall reminds me of that. I'm not saying that wall was subject to the same thing, but yeah, unfortunately, it's got signs of the violence and craziness. So this is Bartholomew, who's the Apostle Bartholomew's chapel. But now this is what you might find in the marketplace, that they're very much used to living this way, and it's cramped quarters in many places, and the little people set up their shops and their goods. You can make your way through there. And as you can tell, it heavily depends upon tourism for their livelihood. Lots of it's enclosed in order to keep you out of the heat of the sun. Yeah, and a lot of the markings are like this in Arabic or in different languages. And so this was a very touching place to be. The stonework in this, again, not original to the time of Jesus, I'm sure. It came afterwards, but even so, we were privileged to have times of worship in areas like these. And according to the Orthodox and Roman Catholic traditions, you would have oftentimes places to light candles that were part of that.
An organ.
Well, I might be wrong. There's a little seat there, but I'm pretty sure that's candles.
See the plug that goes up to the
Well,
wall?
oh, yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and check it out, man.
That looks like a bed.
Yes, it does.
Beautiful. I can't imagine making the arches.
Yes, yeah. How that stonework is done,
Just amazing.
astounding.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me get my bearing here on where we're at.
Did you see any thing that would have represented where Jesus lived or something like it in Nazareth?
I'm not thinking of anything like that, but this is a significant site, and I can't remember. Let me get my bearings here. If this is, I believe this is. I might be getting this wrong. I want to say that this commemorates the birthplace of Mary. Because I think in Jerusalem is where it commemorates where Mary is, the tomb is said to be. But if I remember correctly, this is the chapel that is built around the ruins that are thought to be Mary's family, the birthplace of Mary. And there were places where they were fenced off that you could look into the actual steps of the dwelling place and different things like that. Yeah, so you see the stairs going up in the back there. So we didn't have access to that. But those ancient, that's why this was cordoned off as a site and all of this was built around. And the ornate kind of, these kinds of lights and so forth, very common for the Orthodox and for the Roman Catholic. And so different from our tradition that sometimes I have a hard time relating to that. Here it was fine, but some places it was so much it was overwhelming. Anything you'd like to share with the rest of the class?
Are you supposed to get up and move or what?
Nancy, we need more
I told my
letters.
stuff to
Like
take
those
those
letters.
5 minutes.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll end with lunch here, because we stopped for lunch at Bait Alpha
Okay.
here, and that's where I had my fish that was looking back at me.
You know what? Pastor,
Yes,
can't think, who was here before you? He's in
Terry,
North Carolina.
Terry
Yes,
Schweitzer.
Terry Schweitzer.
They ate lunch in a restaurant and they were served fish that we think Peter ate.
Preserve that long, dried fish, maybe?
Dried
or-
fish. Yeah.
You know, what a tourist trap.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yes, so, and we were fully aware that there's both the historical wonder of the place
Yes.
and there's the tourist trap nature of things and in between. So you kind of, you go in with eyes open, knowing that stuff.
Have you and Chris ever been at Church Sedona and Church in the Hill?
Yes, yeah, we got there this last June with Jacob.
Wouldn't that be beautiful to have a service up there?
What was the other one? It was, what, the floors were all sand and
Oh, really?
it was like it was a wedding probably 4 years ago.
Oh, wow. It's
It
beautiful.
really was. Sedona, at the Church of the Chapel.
So you see, it can be mountainous terrain in areas, there's a little bit of valley. And so this was interesting because as we toured around the country, we saw the Israelis are very industrious. And with their different, sometimes people live in a kibbutz, kind of a commune setting, for lack of a better word, and everybody contributes their work and their efforts, and everyone takes from what's produced. They're in the northern part of Israel. There's the Druze, who are not Jewish, but they are considered very good neighbors. They serve in the Israeli military, and they have their own. But it seems like where you go, they have organized themselves into different kinds of ways of maximizing the area for agriculture or tourism, either way. But there was a lot of this there. And I was surprised at the bananas that they were growing there. And there are places where you see olive trees. When I went to Greece and Spain, I was flabbergasted. Mountains covered with olive trees. Everywhere you went, there were olive trees. Just everywhere you looked, olive trees.
You know, my friend,
Not so much here, but
kid that I grew up with is Greek. His name is George Blastus, and his family lives, and he's got family who lives on Crete, which is just outside of Greece. And they have trees that they are still harvesting that are like thousands of years old. You know, they're just
Oh.
Isn't that?
so much, and he still harvests the olive oil, and it's on a hill, you know, and they have, it's just a rough out little farmhouse, you know, and so that's where he has family there yet, you know, and so he's getting, you know, he's my age, and he's not very healthy. He's got 2 sons, and one son is very technical and living in San Francisco, and the other one says, I'm interested. So he's been learning Greek and learning the business.
oh, wow. With the proximity to the Mediterranean Sea, which is saltwater, there is a great supply of water, but you may be aware that technology is such that to desalinate water, to get it to be potable, is very expensive and very technically difficult. And you really can't irrigate with pure salt water. The plants don't tolerate it. However, they have come up with ways to mitigate that, and they can desalinate to the point where it wouldn't be fresh water to drink, but the plants can tolerate it. So they're learning ways to irrigate using that water supply with a less intensive desalination that's not quite as intensive or expensive.
What are those gray things up there? Are those water ponds or?
No, these are covered areas. They actually cover with netting or, a lot of the banana ones were covered with some sort of netting. So yeah, based on whatever the needs of the different crops were, some could have full exposure to the sun, some had to be covered over with visqueen or whatever they would put. I don't know if it's plastic or netting or something. Okay, and then Beit Shean is number 18, and it's in this area closer to the Jordan River. We'll just touch on that real quickly here. Oh, let's see. All right, here we go. This is the city I told you about. You see the mountain there. This beautiful city was built in such a way that the dwellings and so forth were a little higher, and the water that came down from the mountains was, the pure water you could use for your cooking and drinking and that kind of stuff. And then there was the bathing and there was whatever, and it went down. And so this is the ruins of a city that came after the time of Jesus. It's just so significant, it's worth a look. And we'll end with this today, Beit Shean. You notice the intricacy of the stonework again. This is how they have an example of how they would bring the quarried stones. There's several tons there probably, and so they would have a way of lining it up so the wheels could be, and then an animal or a team would be able to pull it to wherever they're going. So this is how they would transport these large stones. And the process, I'm not sure how they did it safely, but and there was a great amphitheater there. This, we believe, was a pool of some sort, a water collection point where people could, I don't know if it was ritual bathing. You see there's an area that looked like steps going down. And there's steps and seats over here. Now this is fascinating. The floor of this place, if I understand correctly, is not existing anymore. What are these stone deals? Well, apparently they would irrigate and the water would run through here. And I don't know if it was the heat from the stones. I'm not sure if they heated them artificially or if there was some other natural heat, but then whatever it was would warm the up above there and had to do with, so they really had a sophisticated way of getting a spa treatment.
So maybe that pool was really a spa pool.
I didn't have my nails done, I didn't have time. But so anyway, this is all, you see the irrigation areas and all of that was flooded, and it was very sophisticated how they made use of water. All coming from the top and working its way down. And so the water kind of had several uses. It was very efficient all the way down.
It wasn't hot mineral water, it was just regular water.
Since it's not flowing today, I'm not sure if it was fed by mineral springs or if it was.
Because you're talking about heat, whatever, and I thought,
yeah.
If it got around those stones, it might keep the heat.
That very well may be. It might have been mineral springs that were hot springs. And the main roadway of the town surrounded by these columns. Now, here is a gathering area. And you see how it's got the stone walls and the floor. And then there's some different kind of stones that are sticking out all around this kind of U-shaped area. What might that be?
Are they actually seats?
Well, yeah.
There was a little trough that ran in front of it. I wonder if.
No, well, it isn't in front. It's actually right under.
Those go with the spa where you have your.
You have to walk across the top
Ritual
to
feet
reach
worship.
the-
Wash your feet.
Oh,
That's why you're sitting, that's why you're sitting there.
the bathroom.
So, and of course, this would be where the men
right.
would,
Okay.
and so you just, there were probably 50 or so different spots, and you pick out one that, and it was funny because they were spaced differently.
Right.
So I found one that fit.
Is that for real?
It is for real, and there was running water in the trough underneath.
Okay.
So this was at the bottom of the city,
Right.
and so that was how they took care of that.
So now,
care
for
of
that
that, yeah.
particular usage, they use salt water? What did you say?
You said TMI.
I was told that the other day, even today.
Okay, so, yeah, we get the point. But, so that was a communal thing.
Yeah.
So you just, it wasn't private stalls. Okay, so we'll pick up next time with we finally went into Jerusalem, and that's a whole, so as we come to a close today, are you doing okay with this? I felt like today was a little slower, a little, maybe not quite as engaging, but if you're still up for it.
It's still interesting.
I felt it didn't.
I may not be fully back on my game yet, so we'll see.
It's the only way a lot of us will ever see any of this stuff.
Right, exactly.
Right.
I mean, I've
I
never
love it.
seen sittable urinals.
New meaning to put it.
I mean.
I feel like my day is complete.
We started at the top. At the bottom.
Oh, you're so flushed.
Okay, it was a nice career while it lasted, thank you. Okay, with that,
I agree with Ethel, though. We may never get there, so
That's right.
it's fascinating to see what